think it's about time. So welcome everyone. My name is Nosh. I'm really happy to be here today. I just thought I'd share a little bit about my background with you all. I was in a previous lifetime really into sports. I was an athlete. I still consider myself an athlete, but I played soccer at a pretty competitive level. Um, and as you can see in the picture here, I was a goalkeeper. And in one way, you could say that's pretty courageous. In another way, that's pretty crazy because I threw my body in front of a lot of moving objects and sacrificed myself a lot. I love the outdoors. There's a picture of me paddleboarding, as you can see. Over the years, I've gotten into a lot of different holistic health practices, yoga, qigong, just getting out into nature, kind of a health nut myself, and always learning. So, a big part of my journey, led me into health coaching. And it's a big part of what I do now. I also work for Wild Health on the software sales side, and I also work with the health coaches. But my journey has led me into things like meditation, yoga, different kinds of physical training, and primal movement, which we're going to focus on a lot today, as well as the nutrition side of things. And a big part of it, my journey has also led me into more community oriented experiences, nature, and play. So hopefully we can infuse some sense of play into our practice today. So a big reason why I asked those questions in the beginning is it is really important to know your why, have a vision for what you want to create in your life, in your body, and of course, as it relates to physical health and mobility. Really having some time to reflect on your goals and why you're doing what you're doing. That's going to inform, number one, kind of what you need to do, but also just to help give motivation. So when I played competitive soccer, I was so clear. I knew what I had to work on. I wanted to become a better athlete, and then I could set a plan based on that big goal. Obviously in this point in my life, my goals have changed. I want to be able to go on long hikes and go paddleboarding, and be able to bend down and reach up without pain in my knees and my hips. For some of you, it might be just, playing with your kids. It could be whatever you want it to be, but really getting clear on that and what you love. So we're talking about mobility today. I think it'd be important to just touch on what this means and what mobility is. Some of you may have a lot of experience, some of you may have none experience, but simply relates to your capacity to move your body freely through space with ease and control. Mobility is the combination of flexibility and strength and control. So yes, flexibility relates very closely to mobility. You need flexibility for mobility, but it's not just that. It's being able to control your movement actively through a full range of motion, right? And so, as you can see in the picture in the bottom left, passive stretching, you can think of more flexibility. That is not mobility, but dynamic stretching, where you're moving your body in different ways, you're requiring strength as well. That's going to hit on more mobility and what we're going to practice today. One concept I wanted to touch on is this sense of, okay, my body feels tight, my back feels tight, or my hamstring feels tight, so I just need to stretch it. Or the back of my neck feels tight. Very common, especially if we're at the computer a lot. We get this forward head posture. So, okay, I'm gonna, stretch my neck so I can feel better. That is a misconception. It might be part of the equation, but it's not the full part of the equation. And I've gone through years of my own personal experience of just trying to stretch my pain away, and didn't really get that far. So what I wanted to share with you is that it's usually a combination of strengthening and rebalancing as well as the stretching that's needed. So for example, if we're talking about maybe tightness in the low back or hamstrings, there's something called the lower cross syndrome. So you may actually need to strengthen your glute muscles, the back of your hips, and your abdominals. If you're having tightness in your neck, for example, which is very common if we're at the computer, there might be, some strengthening of the neck muscles that you need to do, or the muscles between your shoulder blades, even strengthening of the front of your neck flexors here, which are like the abdominals for the neck. So important to think about this, that it's good to have a combination of strength and flexibility. Which leads me to this whole graph here. So GMB is a company, or GMB Fitness is a company that I've done an apprenticeship with. They are a training program. They have a whole YouTube channel. I'd highly recommend checking it out. GMB has really changed my life in the realm of like physical movement and physical freedom. So they have this whole, they've coined this term physical autonomy. And if you look at the graph there on the left, it's this trifecta of strength, flexibility, and control, right? So exactly what we were talking about earlier with mobility. And it's like, how do you find that balance? How do you find that middle way? And, you know, as I've, this is a little quote here that I put on my Instagram: too much strength leads to rigidity, too much flexibility leads to instability. Find the middle way. One thing that my teacher Ryan at GMB said, you know, aim for a balanced training diet. You know, just like we're trying to find a balance with our macros and our, our food diet, can we also create that balance in our training diet? All right, so I'm just going to share here a video, and while I do this, I realize I maybe didn't share my my sound, so I'm going to just do this real quick here. 1 second. Okay.
The bear, right? I think we're here. Monkey, right? Frogger, right? And then, but I like to stretch out. Doing a lot of different things. I'd rather do this. This, right? Would you rather do that? But I made FF so that you can get to that. The bear, right? I think we're here. Monkey. Do this, like here, for a few minutes, right? Then I want you to try doing this for a few minutes, right? So that's what I meant by I don't really stretch so much anymore, because I like kind of doing this stuff. Right, I like kind of playing with the frogger this way, right? I like playing with the monkey this way. I like playing with the bear this way. So that's how I stretch out, and that's what I want you guys to do.
All right, so I think that video is a neat little introduction into, what a stretching practice could look like, or what a mobility practice could look like in a very dynamic way. And we're going to be exploring some primal movements today. Okay, so some concepts to reframe today's practice. Think of your movement as exploration and play. Invite wonder and curiosity into your movement. I also invite you to infuse gratitude throughout your practice and throughout your day. So in other words, how can we reframe, change the lens through which we are experiencing what is happening in our body, versus maybe fixating on, oh, it needs to be this way. And I'm sharing this from a personal experience of kind of going through a lot of, pain and injury through my body. If we change the lens through which we're experiencing, we can then start to create more positive change. So it's like, instead of working, think of everything as like resistance, how can we kind of go with more of the flow and accept what's happening in our body with wonder, curiosity? How can we be thankful for what our body can do versus getting angry at our body for what it can't do? Because obviously, like, we may have goals to get to a certain place, but we have to be very kind to our body at the same time. Which gets me to this next point of make sure we listen to our body. For some of us who like to push through pain, I'm talking to you, make sure you listen. Everything I'm sharing today is an invitation. You're going to decide what's best for you and modify anything if needed. This is one of my favorite quotes from the Tao Te Ching Lao Tzu, nature is in no rush, yet everything is accomplished. So in other words, slowing down has been one of the keys in my progress in terms of physical training, with yoga and primal movement, with my strength as well. Once I started practicing more of this GMB approach and primal movements, I went very slowly through a lot of the movement, and I was able to actually build strength by doing less and going slower. So not everything has to be a race, or not everything has to be for speed. And if it's one thing that you take away from today, it's like, how can you develop more awareness of what's going on? How can you really start to listen more, listen to your joints, listen what's going on, and then intuitively decide what to do next? This is another way to look at ease and quality, another way just to assess yourself in terms of how things are feeling. So in terms of ease, on one end, is this movement requiring maximum effort, or is this super relaxed? So you can see different words you can use to label for your own vocabulary: challenging, solid, relaxed. Ideally, we're trying to find a middle ground here, right? We don't want to be on the outer edges. We want to find more of our time through the middle. From a quality standpoint, broken, rough, smooth, snappy. So we're from a quality standpoint, we're working towards how can we get things to feel more smooth and snappy. Okay. And just noticing, okay, for certain movements, it might feel choppy. It might feel a little bit broken, and that's okay. We have something to work towards. All right, everyone. So let's get moving here. This is the general plan. We're going to start with a warm up, very gentle, more qigong-like movements, joint circles, and then we're going to get into a little bit more of the primal movements. Okay, I'm going to stop sharing my screen, and hopefully, if you don't have it on the big screen mode, you can change your screen to speaker mode so you can see me from a full screen. I'm going to invite everyone to stand up. So I'm going to go ahead and change my screen here. And if there's any issues with the sound or being able to see anything, please just chat in the chat box. Okay. All right. So we're going to start with some simple joint circles. So from a standing position, I'm going to come a little bit closer to you. We're going to start with some neck rotation. So chin down towards the chest, right ear to right shoulder. Okay. And then very slowly to start off with, just doing some simple neck rotations. Checking in with your breath, noticing how it feels. A little bit of cracks, pops, totally normal, totally okay. If you need to adjust here, please do so. And then make sure you go in both directions. So especially as we're warming up here, you're checking in with your body, checking in with your breath. You can feel free to close your eyes through any of the movements. So that's another way just to tune in to see how things are going. Awesome. Coming back to center, we're going to move the shoulder. So we're going to do an imaginary backstroke. So imagine you're swimming in the pool. Take some big breaths here, and I'll do big circles with the shoulders. You can go slow to start if you want to experiment picking up the pace. Feel free to do so. I'm twisting my spine and my hips just a little bit. Nicely done. Hands on the hip. We'll do some hip circles. Kind of like you're doing a slow hula hoop dance here. And if you want, you can bend into the knees. We do this, bending into the spine. We do some side bends, forward bends, back bends, opening up every single part of the spine. If you haven't switched directions, go for it. Awesome. Feet together or close together. Hands on the top of the knees. We're going to do some circles here at the knees. And then again, bending into the knees as much as you want or as little as you want. What does it feel like to do it with your eyes closed? Really checking in. So we're oiling up the joints here. Coming back up to standing, feet a little bit wider. Leaning on your left foot and then lift the right heel off the floor. So you're on the ball of your toe. And then from here, doing circles. So I'm still pushing into the ball of my right foot, shifting the weight, and then doing a circle here. It's kind of like a calf raise, but in a circular motion. Make sure you go the opposite direction. Good. Other foot, same thing. Okay, pushing into the ball of the left foot. Warming up the calf too, warming up the ankles, switching directions. Awesome, nicely done. Arms out by your side. We're going to twist the body, get a nice spinal twist. This is also going to open up the shoulders. Lower body is nice and grounded. Okay, upper body is loose. Okay, just think of your arms as like noodles. They're just floating in space. Okay, so grounded through the legs and then looking over the shoulder, looking behind you. So getting some nice rotation through the thoracic spine. And then let's go ahead and experiment by bringing the arms up a little bit higher. So the arms are more active now. Okay, maybe around head height. And we're going to see what that feels like for the shoulders. Awesome, nicely done. Coming back to center. Okay, the next thing I'm going to show you is also for the shoulders, spine, and the hips. I call it a Zen swing. I learned this from my teacher, Paul Check. So you're going to imagine you're swinging a golf club in both directions, like a pendulum swing. Okay, so the movement starts from the hips, rotating at the hip, and then I pick up my heel. So I'm pivoting on the foot. So that's the lower body movement. The upper body movement is a golf swing. So moving horizontally here. Now your gaze is at the floor in front of you. Okay, and then play around with shallow swing, play around with a big pendulum swing. Notice how that feels for the shoulders. So this is great for opening up the joints, hip joints, spine, shoulders. It's great to get the energy flowing. It's good for the hips. It's a very simple practice and very effective. So what we're doing right now, these last few minutes, you can do is like, let's say you just have 5 minutes during the day. In the morning, you can use this warm up as kind of a little mobility routine here. Okay, coming back to center, squat stance, whatever that looks like for you. So maybe shoulder width apart, toes slightly pointed out. I'm going to inhale, reach up, bring the hands together. And then down the center line, we're going to sit our hips back and down. Maybe you're coming down halfway. Maybe you're coming down parallel. Maybe you're coming down even lower. Whatever is right for you, just feel into it. I'm going to invite you to do this squat nice and slow. So there's no rush. Even if you did one squat over the course of 30 seconds, it's totally fine. And as I'm coming down, I'm trying to keep my back relatively straight. Okay? So I'm sitting my weight back toward the heels. And if you do come lower to the floor, it's okay if your back rounds a little bit. Okay, and if you have this flexibility, you can experiment just coming down to the ground. Okay. So for those of you who want to improve your squat mobilities, you know, that mobility to the hips and the hamstrings, and it's a struggle to get down low, what I'd recommend you do is like hang on to a railing or to a wall, or, you know, just hang on to something, grab onto it, and then lean back and just kind of hang out in this position. Okay, and then maybe you move side to side. So I'm giving you a couple of options here. I think some of you have your screen on. That's awesome if you're sharing your screen, that way I can also see you. So let's just take about 30 more seconds here playing around with the squat. Everyone is doing great. Yeah, feel free to share your screen if you want. Allison, really nice job. And how's the breath? Are you noticing your breath? Check in. How do the hips feel? How do the ankles feel? Very nice. Okay. Wherever you are, we'll just come back up to standing. We're just going to shake the body out, shake out the legs, shake out the arms, shake out the hips. You're going to inhale through your nose, exhale, ha sound through the mouth, ha. Shake the arms, shoulders, head, neck, torso, hips. One thing I'm doing, I'm bouncing on my heels like this, and that's going to create a vibration all the way up to the top of the head. So again, inhale through the nose, exhale through the mouth, ha sound, shake it out. Nicely done. Keep going here. One more breath in through the nose, out through the mouth. Very nice. Okay. We're going to go ahead and pause. Just relax. You can just stand for a moment and check in with the body. Check in. How are you feeling? Maybe take a few deep breaths. Just going to adjust some things here. Okay, we're going to start moving towards the floor now. So I'm just going to look at my notes. Okay, so if you have a yoga mat or some sort of carpet, that's great. What we're going to do is come into a tabletop position. Okay, like this, hands and knees. Pad your knees if you need to. And what we're going to do is we're going to explore movement with the shoulder blade to start with, okay? So you're going to try to keep your elbows locked, your arms straight, and we're going to work on shoulder retraction and protraction, okay? So squeezing the shoulder blades together, okay, and then pushing them apart. So what we're working on is we're isolating the movement of the shoulder blade around the rib cage. So this is really important for shoulder strength and mobility. One thing that we're doing here is called a closed chain movement. So our arm is like locked to the floor. What we were doing earlier, just swinging the arms, that was an open chain stretching, swinging movement. It's good to do both. So now with the hands attached to the floor, we're getting a little bit more grounding. Okay, so by now you should start to feel some fatigue, maybe in the muscles that control the shoulder blade. And now let's do some circles. Let's get the shoulder blades moving in all directions here. And then circle the other way. Just notice if your arms are bending. See if you can keep the elbows straight. Arms straight as much as you can. Good, nicely done. Okay. The next thing we're going to do is hip circles here in this position, combining rounding, arching in the back. So if you've done cat-cow before, kind of similar, but we're adding some circles to the movement. And then make sure you go in both directions. All right. Just for 2 seconds, or not 2 seconds, maybe like 20 seconds, we're going to connect into the core. So we're going to engage the muscles of the abdominals. We're going to breathe into the belly on the inhale. So the belly button's going to drop. And then on the exhale, we're going to blow out the mouth like you're blowing up a balloon and squeeze the belly button into the core. Okay, and you're going to feel the belly button coming up. You're going to feel the core engage. So when I say connection to the core, you know what I mean? We'll do that one more time. So inhale into the belly. Exhale, imagine you're blowing up a balloon. This time, push all the air out. So blow up the biggest balloon you've ever seen in your entire life. So as you exhale, the belly button's coming up to the spine. Nicely done. Okay. So I'm kind of rushing through a lot of these things just because of time today. I want to get through a lot of different movements. We're going to do hip circles here. So you're going to try to keep your back flat. Your knee, when I say hip circles, your knee is actually moving, but we're engaging the glutes now, doing a circular movement of the leg. So the knees coming up, out, back. See if you can get it back up and then down. Okay, so big circle with the knee joint, but we're actually working the hip here. And then do a couple circles in the opposite direction. So heel coming up to the sky, and then knee going out. We're doing external rotation, and then coming up, around, and down. I can't see you all, but I'm sure you're doing a great job. Okay. And then I'm going to show you from a different angle. The arms locked. See if you can externally rotate the arms so the elbows are facing backwards. External rotation, lock the arms. So we're going to do the circle on the other leg. Okay. So for everything today, we're just going to be doing a few reps. We're not going to be spending, we could spend hours doing a ton of these different things, but I'm going to try and take you through some more movements today. Okay. Make sure you do the other direction. Awesome. Now we're going to come to a seated position with your legs in front. I'm going to bring this down just a little bit. Okay. So legs in front of you, nice and wide. Arms are behind you. We're going to windshield wiper our hips. See if you can keep your spine nice and straight. So windshield wiping the legs side to side. And I'm ending in this 90-90 position. Okay, so one leg external rotation, the other leg is internal rotation. Now, if this is really comfortable for you, you've got the control, maybe reaching your arms out to the side. See if you can create that length through the spine. Nicely done. Okay. And, personally, I'm noticing, okay, my right hip, I'm feeling some clicks and pops. Okay, you might have that. Okay, so just notice what movement might feel choppy. Where might there be sharp pain? How can you kind of slowly move through it if there is a bit of that kind of tension, maybe just going very slowly. Okay, and now we're going to come to one side. And for this one, you want your knees on something soft. Okay, so one leg externally rotated, one leg internally rotated. This is your 90-90 position. We're going to lean forward. And for this one, we're going to start with our hands. We're going to lean slightly forward, and we're going to push both knees into the floor to lift our hips up. So we're coming into this full extension of the hips. Okay. And then coming back down. I'm going to try and show this from different angles. Okay. And if it's too intense for you, see if you can bring your feet a little bit closer in towards your body. So you don't have to be at a 90-degree angle. And then if you feel comfortable, if you feel strong and capable, you can do this without your hands. It will help to lean forward. And essentially what we're doing is a hip hinging movement. If you've done hip hinging before or anything like a deadlift, it's part of the squat too, or hinging at the hips, we're building strength and flexibility in the hips. One hip is working on external rotation, the other hip is working on internal rotation. Okay. And now we're going to go to the other side. Again, starting in that 90-90 position, you need to use your hands for balance, lean forward, and then press down, down, down into the floor to lift up. So we root down to rise up. Okay, so once you start getting the hang of this, the next progression, okay, is maybe lifting your hands off the floor. The next progression is how can I come down with grace and ease, and can I come down super slow? So for this one, actually, the lowering portion becomes more challenging once you really break it down and slow it down. Okay. So a lot of muscles are engaging here. We're also using a lot of our core, not just our hips. All right. Very nicely done. Okay. Feel free to do some more windshield wipers if you want. Now, what we're going to transition to next is some wrist prep, because we're going to be doing some primal movements. We want to make sure the wrists are feeling good. And I will say too, if it's ever too much on your wrists, take a break. You can also change the position of your arms. You can make a fist. You can work on your forearms. So a lot of options here. We're going to get back into the tabletop position. Okay, keeping the arms straight, we're going to lift the wrists off the floor by pressing into the knuckle pads. So I'm going to show you up close. I'm pressing into this part of the hand, the knuckle pads, and the wrist is going to come off the floor. Okay, so I'm doing this movement. And think of like a calf raise, but for your forearms. Okay, if this is too much, just lean back in your hips. And if you want more intensity, lean forward. Okay, see if you can keep the elbows, arms straight. Nicely done. Now you're going to turn your fingers out to the side. Again, in that tabletop position. This time, side to side, working a little bit more of the flexibility of the wrists. Then if you work on a computer, which I'm guessing is a lot of us, this can be really helpful. So now what we're going to do, we're going to do the same movement, but now we're going to initiate the movement by pressing the fingers into the floor. So kind of like what we did last time, but to move to the left, I'm pressing my right finger pads into the floor to initiate the movement. So the right hand is engaging, the left wrist is stretching. And then we do the opposite thing. Left hand pushes into the floor, getting a stretch on the right side. Okay, you get the idea. And coming back to, okay, what is mobility? It's this combination of strength and flexibility, controlling the range of motion. Nice and done, shake it out. This time we're going to place the back of the hands on the floor, okay, or on your mat. Okay. We're going to just do a few rotations here, stretching the other side. Nicely done. Okay, and then bring that off the floor, release the fingers. So straighten the fingers, squeeze into a fist, straighten, squeeze, squeeze, squeeze. Let's do a few of those. So just like you'd warm up, your legs for running, or your core, your upper body, we're warming up our wrists because we're going to be doing some primal movement. Okay. So the next thing we're going to get into is our deep squats. Okay. And then for those of you who have a challenge getting into a deep squat, it's okay if your heels come off the floor. Okay, totally fine. And for those of you who find this really challenging, I want you to hold on to a railing or hold on to a wall or something where you can just kind of hang out. Okay. For those of us that can kind of manage, we're just going to go side to side. Opening up the hips. Okay, and then from here, we're going to take some baby steps. Okay, maybe placing more weight onto one leg, seeing what that's like. This is kind of a duck walk. Okay, I'd invite you to go very slow. Maybe you twist, change directions. Okay, we're just exploring movement in the squat. This is really good for your ankle mobility, knee flexibility, hip, inner thighs, all that good stuff. Okay. So from here, we're going to play around with transitions into what's called a frogger. And we're coming from the squat position into a floating tabletop. So we're going to reach the arms forward, place them down onto the ground, shift the weight forward. The knees are hovering off of the floor. We're going to hang out here for a couple seconds and then push back into our squat. Okay, so the simple movement of leaning forward, shoulders floating over the wrists, nice and strong. The core is working, the shoulders are working. Oh, and we're getting a nice stretch in our squat position. Okay. Because we're going to cover a lot of different movements, you don't need to exhaust yourself doing each one. So maybe try this 2 or 3 times. Give yourself a rest. Nicely done. Okay. The next thing we're going to explore, same thing, but a little bit to the side with one arm. So we're just going to explore leaning into one arm, slowly coming back to the squat. This is prepping us for some side movements, some monkey movements. So going forward is going to be the Frogger. Going to the side is a little more of a monkey. And what we're doing here is, even if it's just a simple weight lean, we're building our strength into the shoulder. So as we come to the side, make sure we're pressing that hand into the floor. This is going to build scapular strength. Okay, and like I noticed myself, I'm getting pretty tired here. Listen to your body, rest as needed. Okay, awesome. Just take a break, have a seat. Get your hands behind you. Okay, there we go. So legs are in front of you. Now we're going to get into a crab position. So fingers are turned out to the side. Externally rotate the shoulders. Inhale, lift the hips up. Again, working on back body, shoulder strength. And working on hip strength here in the glutes. So if we've got this down, we can explore moving side to side, shifting the weight to one arm. Okay, you can also explore shifting the weight to one leg. Okay, if your hips are sagging, that's okay, but see what it might be like to lift your hips up to the sky, getting that full extension. All right, so we can explore shifting weight in the legs, shifting weight in the arms, maybe crawling here. This is our crab walk, 1 foot opposite arm. You're doing great. Can you move slowly with control? How is your breath in this movement? Nicely done. Give yourself a little bit of a rest. Okay, so the next thing we're going to do is called the frog walk. Okay, and so it's a very basic movement that is great for building strength in the core, the shoulders, the hips as well. And it's also going to start and end in the squat position. So we kind of practiced for it already. You're going to start in your semi-squat or your deep squat. Reach the arms forward. Plant the hands down, straight arms, shoulders over the wrists. Step, step. Okay? So right foot stepping toward the outside of the right hand, left foot stepping toward the outside of the left hand. Okay, if you don't have that mobility or that flexibility, maybe you're just taking a 2-inch step and a 2-inch step, and then coming down. Reset, reaching the hands forward, shoulders over the wrists, step, step. Okay, maybe you don't come down into a full squat. Maybe you're up here, okay, because that's what you're working with. So you're going to adjust and modify, do what's right for you. Working on these baby steps in the squat. Now, if this is really simple for you, great. You can work on a progression, which is more of a hop, where you're taking both feet forward at the same time. And if you're doing that, that's more of a frogger hop. See if you can float yourself forward by really pressing the hands into the floor. So it's less of a jump and more of a float. So we'll take the next 15 seconds or so to play around with the frog walk, or the frog hop, float rather. Maybe it's more of like a handstand float for your advanced folks. Okay. And I'm just gonna take like a 10-second rest here because I can really feel my heart rate going up. Allison, nice work. Let's see if I can see anyone else. Thomas, nicely done. That was awesome. Yeah, feel free to share your screens here. Okay, take a little breather. Oh my gosh, there's so much more I want to do. Okay, so the next thing we're gonna do is get into a down dog position. Okay, and then for the primal movements, this one is actually called the bear, and we're gonna start walking in the bear. So this one is great for flexibility in the calves, the hamstrings, also shoulder control. Okay. So starting from hands and knees, we curl the toes, lift the hips up. Okay, if you need to, bend into the knees. You're looking through the legs. Okay, lift the heels off the floor. We're going to take a baby step with the left foot, right hand. So we're going opposites. Left hand, right foot. You get the idea. Okay, neck is relaxed. You're looking through the legs. Baby steps. Working on the coordination from the feet to the hands. And we're going to see if we can go backwards. So when you're going backwards, you're going to imagine that you're pushing your hand into the floor. It's like you're doing an overhead press, and the lift is coming from the scapula. So it's the scapula is lifting up, reaching up. It's like you're reaching to pick something up from the sky. So we're doing that same movement, but pushing into the floor. So this is how you can get a shoulder press workout by doing the bear walk. So now I'm just going backwards. So this time I'm initiating the movement by pushing the hand into the floor. Okay, again, bend into your knees as much as you need to. The idea is we're getting our hips up to the sky. So upside down V. Okay. And then we're going to come back to this down dog position. Just take a look here. We're going to step forward with the left foot halfway and turn it out 90 degrees to the side. So it's kind of like a half lunge. I'm turning it out. My right arm is pushed into the floor, strong with the shoulder, and I'm twisting. And then maybe coming into this full side lunge stretch. Maybe your hips come all the way down to the ground. You can hang out here for a few seconds, breathe. But we're also just kind of, now I'm reversing the movement. We're working on this control with the shoulder, flexibility with the hip on both sides, and this whole side body stretch. Opening up my chest. I'm strong in the shoulder. Okay, so this is a bear with a twist. Okay, same thing other side. I'll show you from this angle. I'm going to take a big step with my right foot, and I'm turning my right foot out to the side, 90 degrees. You can see now from this side angle. My left shoulder is strong, pushing down into the floor. Okay? So you can explore this movement here. And this can even lead into what's called a spider push-up. So maybe you don't go into the full stretch, but then you bend both elbows, and we're getting into something called a spider push-up. So I just want to show you, you can use these movements for both flexibility and strength. Nicely done. Maybe take a few more seconds doing that. So that was the bear twist. The next thing that I'm going to show you is a transition from a crab to a bear crawl. Okay, so we were in this crab position earlier, it's basically like a breakdancing move. So we're gonna use our coordination now to switch from the crab into a crawl, okay? So you're gonna lift from a tabletop position. I'm floating my hips up in the air. I'm gonna lift my left hand and then kick my right foot through to kind of where my left hand was. So we're twisting, kicking through. Okay, and then we're gonna take the right hand, lift up, and then the left foot is gonna kick through underneath to replace. So now I'm just twisting in one direction, working on shoulder, core, rotational strength, rotational core and shoulder strength, and then a hip strength as well. And then you can go both directions. If this is too much, you can work on just a simple crab or tabletop. So what we're going to do to finish off is we're going to just take the next, say like 45 seconds or so to just explore through some of the different movements that we want. I know this is crammed into such a short period of time. I've done 3-hour workshops on this in the past. So we're going to start in a squat position. You can follow what I'm doing or make up your own movement. I would invite you to just play and explore and do your own thing here. The three main starting positions, we have the squat, we have the down dog or the bear position, we have the crab position, right? And then kind of in between this floating tabletop. So we're just going to play around. I'm going to invite you to crawl around, maybe walking sideways. Maybe you're crawling forwards, backwards. Hips can be low, hips can be up. Maybe you're moving sideways. Okay. Perhaps doing a step to the side and a bear twist. We're gonna start to play. How can I maybe combine these different movements? And we're kind of duck walking around the room and changing direction. Really, this whole floor is your playground. And we're going to go for about, let's say 20 more seconds. But can you also move slow under control? Can you move with lightness? Maybe you make up something. I don't think there's really any right or wrong unless you stop breathing or stop listening to your body. Okay, you guys. And then maybe find some way to gracefully come to a pause and finish or down towards the floor. Okay, I wanted to show you a few different stretches, but I'm going to have to cut this short. The first thing we're going to do is an overhead shoulder stretch. So for those of you who might feel tightness in the shoulders, lats, it might help. You don't need a bench or a bed, but it might help to have like a little chair or stool or something. If not, you can just rest your hands on the floor. So from a kneeling position, you're going to reach your hands overhead onto your chair. We're going to keep a slight engagement in the core and then let the chest drop down toward the floor. And then we're going to actively push the hands down into the chair or let the chest sink and then push down to lift the chest up. Okay, so there's going to be this slight shoulder blade movement happening and a slight rotation in the shoulders. We're just simply coming down and up. The hands are engaged, the shoulders are engaged. The low back is stable. Okay, and we're working on our shoulder and thoracic spine mobility. So we're not just passively stretching, we're doing a dynamic contract and relax. Okay. And for time's sake, we'll transition on, but you can do 3 sets of 10 of those contract, relax, and then get into a stretch. Okay. I'm going to show you one of my favorite stretches. It's a scorpion twist. I'm going to show you from this angle. You're going to be on your belly. Arms out into a T. Okay. You're going to look to your left, and then your left foot is going to reach back and to the side towards the floor. Okay, and we're going to do some dynamic movement here, back and forth. So looking to the right leg reaches behind you. So we have a spinal twist, a shoulder opener. So whichever shoulder is stretching, see if you can externally rotate that shoulder. Okay. And then also opening up the hips with the stretch. After you do dynamic movement, you can also get into a hold here. So this stretch is working on a lot of different things. Great. And then what we're going to do, I'm going to cut it there for the stretches, because I want to save time for questions, and I know there's people who sent in questions. The other stretch I was going to show was a pigeon stretch, which you may have done through yoga before, but I figured most people know that one. All right. So what I'd like to do is open up the floor for questions. So number one, you can put your question in the chat box. There were some questions that were sent to me beforehand, so I'm going to pull those up. See if I can find them. Okay. The first one was, do I have any good recommendations for a short kind of routine? I'd say what we did in the beginning for the joint circles, and then incorporating any of the primal movements that we just did. What I'd also highly recommend is checking out GMB Fitness, and I'm going to put that in the chat box. They have an amazing YouTube channel. So just look up GMB Fitness. They have a bunch of routines, exercises. You can really just get lost down that rabbit hole, but I highly recommend that. The next question I got was, how frequently should I be doing mobility training? And the short answer is that really depends on a lot of different factors, but you can do a little bit every single day, like even the joint circles that we went through in the beginning during our warm-up. You can use some of the primal movements as a warm-up to your athletic activity or to your workouts. So you could really be doing this every single day, but I think with anything, you want to have variety between engaging the front of your body, the back of your body, having that nice combination and that balance of strengthening and flexibility exercises. But if you're doing mobility from more of like a light, from a lower intensity perspective, you could do it every day. Any sort of small habits I could start with, and any long-term goals I can build up to. Small habits, I would say getting into a squat, like taking squat breaks throughout your day, because that's going to help with your overall hip mobility. And then doing those torso twists. Those are little things that you can start doing. And then I guess any of the exercises we've done today. And I think the longer term goals really depend on what you're looking to create and work towards. What did I say GMB Fitness is again? So that GMB Fitness is a training company. They have online tutorials and online fitness programs, but I don't like to use the word fitness because they're more of like like a very holistic approach, kind of like how Wild Health is a very holistic approach to health. GMB is very much a holistic approach to physical freedom. What is the difference between mobility and flexibility? So we covered that during our session today. Flexibility is a component within mobility, but mobility includes both flexibility, strength, and control through different ranges of motion. And for those of you who have questions, feel free to put them in the chat box. I'd be happy to answer, even if you want to come off mute and ask your question. Very open to it. Is it good to constantly vary the mobility work or establish a daily routine and address specific restrictions as they come up? I'd say yes to vary the routine, but if you are, doing something similar to what we did today, by nature, you will have a varied routine. General, you want to think of, okay, what are the different body parts? You want to make sure we target the spine, the shoulders, the hips, those are your main ones. And then you want to, generally think just when you're thinking of like a exercise programming of like whether you're doing strength or flexibility, you want to think of like the general base movement. So you have pushing and pulling. So you want to have a balance between the stuff that you're doing while you're pushing into the floor and also or pulling or pushing behind you. You want to have a balance between working out the front of the core and then the back body and the front body, the quads and the hamstrings. You want to have a balance. If you're doing squats all day, every day, that's an imbalanced training routine. If you're doing push-ups all day, every day, that's an imbalanced routine. So you want to make sure you're balancing the front of the body, the back of the body. You're doing circular movements, right? So even if you're sitting at the computer all day, you can do things like this, right? You can do neck rotations. You want to vary it as much as you can. And then again, I'd also just say it really depends on what your goals are and then what your current conditions are in terms of injury wise or what limitations you have. So you have to address all of these things that you have going on. Let's see if there's other questions. Can you please share options for those with physical disabilities? I think it's a tough question to answer in like a short amount of time without really knowing what the individual case is. But I think it comes back to the whole concept of you are the one who is aware of what you have going on in your body, to really slow down and listen and to slowly work through some of these movements. I've taught these animal movements to clients in their 70s, clients with, I've worked on clients with disc issues, spinal issues, variety, knee cert, all that kind of stuff. So you can do these movements with modifications, okay? For those of you who just chatted in, you're welcome. I'm glad this was helpful. Feel free to put in any other questions you have. I'm worried about my knees with weight training. Any tips? Okay. If you're having knee issues, especially like runner's knee or kind of pain on the outside of the knee, the front of the knee, usually what that means is there's some sort of imbalance happening with the muscles in the front of the knee versus the back of the knee. So we're talking about an imbalance between the quad muscles and then the hamstrings and the glutes. Usually, if there's any knee issues going on, I'd immediately look at the hips. And I'm saying from also personal experience, I've had 2 knee surgeries. My main issue was a lack of strength and mobility in my hips, a lack of control. So I had to do a lot of things like glute bridges and then working up to like single leg lunges and hip hinges and bringing a lot of strengthening into the back. For those of you who are dealing with back pain and or knee pain, I'd highly look into something called foundation training. I'll put that in the chat box, foundation training. Daniel, do I do private or group classes? Yes, I do. Right now I'm doing something called Zen Sundays, which is like a mix of this movement and then breath work. So it's kind of like, that's why I call it Zen Sunday. I do those about 1 to 2 times a month, and a follow-up email to you all. I'll send you a link to my website so you can check out that information. Yeah, so just to recap on like resources, the truth is there's plenty of stuff out there. I'm just kind of sharing some resources that have really helped me. GMB Fitness for all this kind of primal movement philosophy, foundation training for back pain. That's just kind of like the tip of the iceberg, but they have both made a huge difference in my life. I've also practiced yoga on and off for the last 12 years. That has helped in a variety of different ways. Highly recommend mindfulness practice as well to kind of better tune into the body. So things like breath work or any other kind of mindfulness exercise. Yeah, and feel free to come to one of my Zen Sunday classes. I'll just go ahead and put my website here in the chat box for you, but we'll be sending it to you afterwards too. Any other questions? I'm going to see if there's any other questions that I didn't get to. Post-running mobility movements that are most beneficial. I'd say that generally speaking, like the squat is a really good overall mobility movement, anything moving in and out of the squat, because that's going to get both the hips, the calves, and the ankles. And then any kind of like lunging, runner's lunge kind of movement is really helpful. And then pretty much any of the primal movements that we've done, but just more focusing on a little bit more of the flexibility side, but less of the strength side. Okay, I'm just seeing if there's anything else here. Someone asked, is it possible to increase mobility at 67? Yes, it definitely is. Like I said, I've worked with clients into their 70s, have seen major improvements. Before becoming a health coach, I used to work as a personal trainer for about 5 years and worked in physical therapy context, fitness context. So I've worked with clients in a lot of different settings. And I've seen amazing transformations. In an overhead pressing movement, should the upper traps engage towards the end of the motion? So I was talking earlier about when you're pressing your arm up overhead, you want to create the sensation that there's this lift coming from the shoulder blade. So when you're doing this, yes, it is perfectly fine for the upper trap to engage and reach up and try and get that full range of motion. So you don't want to keep your shoulder packed down. That actually restricts the movement. You want, let's say you're raising your arm up sideways overhead. There's quite a few muscles that are working to rotate the shoulder blade. Your serratus, your lower trap, your upper trap. You want to get that reach. And like we practiced with the bear walk, going backwards, you're pushing into the floor and then reaching up, getting the stretch from down here. And that's going to help the strength and the health of your shoulder. Okay. I think covered most of the questions there. Do I recommend a weight training practice for strength, or is this sufficient? I'd say, yeah, I think, again, it just depends on what are your goals, what is your current state and your condition. For example, for me, I mostly do body weight. I'd say that's like 90% of what I do, but I also do weight training with kettlebells and weights and whatnot. And that can be very, very beneficial too. So I think it really depends on what your goals are. But I think, exploring these primal movements, you realize you can do a lot in terms of strength. And there are many creative ways in which you can use your body weight for strength. But with that said, I do use weights, and I think weight training is also amazing if done correctly with proper form. And again, I think it just comes down to what are your goals too. If you just want to like play with your kids or go for walks and hikes, you probably don't need to do a ton of weight training. Again, it just comes down to what's your why, what's your current, condition. The great thing about Primal movement is you can do it anytime, anywhere. That's a great question. Thomas, you're so welcome. Thanks for all the feedback, everyone. You all did great. I know we went a little bit over time. Usually I spend a couple hours doing these kinds of workshops. So tried to squeeze in as much as I could in a little time. So I really appreciate you all for joining in. Thank you so much. And we'll go ahead and close the webinar. Thank you so much for joining.